Welcome to Ask AI, the podcast that brings you insightful interviews and news from the world of Canadian artificial intelligence. This episode is sponsored by Microsoft Canada. Microsoft is committed to building trusted and responsible AI systems. To learn more, go to microsoft.com/AI and check out their free AI business school to start building intelligence into your solutions today. We're also sponsored by Cinchi, the global leader in data fabric technology. Visit Cinchi.com to learn how to eliminate integration and turbocharge your AI transformation.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Ask AI podcast, where we interview leaders all across Canada in artificial intelligence. And today, we're really lucky to be joined by Arooj Ahmed Qureshi. She's a data scientist working at NPowered and has over 5 years of experience in software engineering, data modeling, and building end-to-end machine learning applications across security, healthcare, and education. Welcome.
Hi, thank you very much for having me here. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Yeah, it's so exciting to speak with you today. And, we're going to dive into what NPowered does. We're going to talk through your background and experience. We're going to touch on all sorts of exciting things that hopefully will really inspire our listeners and give them an example and a roadmap that they too can follow if they want to get into AI. So with that, I want to start with a little bit more about you. You went to University in Central Punjab, in Edinburgh, at McMaster. Talk to me a little bit more about your journey, because it looks like you've only been in Canada since 2017, and that is super exciting. Tell us more.
Yes, absolutely. That's a roller coaster journey, but believe you me, that is like you are having a roller coaster in the Wonderland. You are enjoying it. You have the fear, but you're loving that with the acceleration that you're getting. So I love to play with data. That's why when back in my country in Pakistan, I did my degree in computer engineering. And then initial jobs that you are into coding, designing an application. But the thing that fascinates me a lot is that this is the world that we are in. We are not short of data. The speed of the data is so fast that it's us who are supposed to extract the information out of. This is the world where we need to make sense out of data. What is the sensible data? What is the noise? So that was the point that made me fall in love with this. And that's why while back in my country, I did my postgraduate certification from University of Edinburgh from UK, because I wanted to explore this. I wanted to see how the world is handling it. And then life took another turn and I got an opportunity for McMaster. So they have their own lab with Microsoft Azure. And they wanted to have worked with them on that particular project where they're designing multiple things around data. So that was something which I've always wanted to. I wanted to see that how the world is handling this thing. Because I'm from the developing countries. So I really wanted to see how the developed countries are doing that. So in 2017, as a woman, as a mother of 2 daughters, there was a lot of apprehension, coming to Canada for your dream. So am I sacrificing future of my kids? So I wasn't sure about that, but I took that step. I had faith. I've explored things and I think, no, we'll do good. So we came here in 2017. I did my computer engineering from McMaster University. And the good thing was all is well that ends well. My kids love Canada. The kind of diversity they found here, and the kind of opportunities they were looking forward to. And they said, Mom, the opportunities you got here, we really wanted to have them as well. So that made me stay back in Canada. But the experience I had at McMaster working with diversity of data, I would say. I worked with IoT data, like for example, Google Map doesn't work inside the building. So what will you do when you enter a building and you don't have an internet? So there you need all the sensors that your cell phone has. So all the possible information that you can think of. So that was my first project. And I was like, oh my God, I never thought of that. The life without Google Map, but that is possible inside the building when you enter a new building, So that was my first project as a student. And then I got an opportunity to work with a startup, which was a healthcare one. And idea was that the brain is complex, but the brain is giving you signals all the time. So there are older adults who already have a brain hemorrhage and they're prone to having it again. So we designed a device which they wear it at night as a cap, nothing more. And my machine learning algorithm was monitoring it. Is something wrong there? Is something wrong there? And if my algorithm finds something wrong, so within 5 minutes, the algorithm is going to call 911 and their loved ones, whoever is on the speed check. So things like these make me motivated. So as I said, it was a roller coaster thing, but it was fun. It was a lot of learning. It was a lot of achievements during that time period.
Wow. Well, this is extremely exciting. Thank you for sharing that. And I love the way you framed it as a roller coaster, but at Wonderland, where you have the fear and the acceleration at the same time.
Yes, the heart is pumping, but you really wanted to go for it. You want to reach the end, you know? You wanted.
Exactly, exactly. That's fantastic. And, as a very, very proud Canadian, I'm thrilled to hear that in moving to Canada, you've also been able to have, great experiences for you and great opportunities for you, but also for your kids. And that's a really wonderful thing that I think, native born Canadians like myself might take for granted. And I'm so thrilled that you all love Canada. One of the other things you mentioned was like all these various projects you've worked on, like detecting strokes, detecting even concealed weapons. I'd love to hear more about that one. But what made you choose NPowered and the energy sector?
Yes, so there were actually two factors for choosing EnPowered. One is the sector, the energy sector, because as I mentioned, I worked prior to that. I worked in the IoTs, I worked in the healthcare, I had concealed weapon detection experience. So the another emerging thing which is in the world is about clean tech. It's about contributing towards your earth, contributing towards your nature. So I really wanted to, along with all the information that I have, I wanted to contribute towards turning something back to your nature as well. And that's where EnPowered came in. Because when I looked at, because it's a startup, but the best part about EnPowered is that it's one of the pioneers in clean tech in Ontario. So they're working in multiple aspects of energy. So they are coming up with a one bill payment structure with no upfront cost. They are helping their clients that, for example, identifying the spikes in energy and telling the clients, oh, don't use it there. If you don't use it at the peak time, you can save around 48% of that. So that really fascinates me, that what kind of innovation sort of thing people are doing, because I get my electricity bill as well. And I was looking at it, I never thought I could save energy for that. So I really like that aspect. And the second was a personal thing, because the interview process I went through EnPowered, it's what like throughout the process, it's not that the company selects an employee, it's like the employee is looking for the second home sort of a thing. So during that interview process, I get to meet the CEO, I get to meet the HR and my team, my prospective team. So that gave me a little flavor of the work environment there. So honestly, it's been like more than a year now. But the thing I realized the first day, I'm still sticking to it. And that is that they really empowered you, they give you the power within your domain. So that makes me select EnPowered as well. So there are two aspects. One is the sector and the work they are doing there in clean tech. And the second, the working environment there.
That's incredible. It really does matter where you work and who you work with and the way that you're treated, that entire experience. So I'm thrilled that you found your second home, as you put it, and wonderful folks. And Powered sounds really cool. And now we've talked about you, we've talked about your journey. We're maybe 30% of the way through our time here. And let's focus on NPowered and really dive into the nuts and bolts and digging into the AI aspects of it. In one sentence or less, what does NPowered do? Just really quickly in one sentence.
So it's creating the innovative energy platform. In one word, if I have to conclude this, it's trying
Yes.
to build innovative energy solutions for the market. It's making things, it's simplifying things in this sector. Whether it's about the payment side, whether it's about reducing your cost towards energy, it's about the adoption towards the flexible energy assets, how to handle them. So any aspect of energy which seems like a complicated one, EnPowered provides you innovative, simplified solutions.
Okay, very cool. And one of the examples you said was if you use at a different time, you can save 48% of your energy. That's one example of like palpably what NPowered does. Give me another example that's that simple that our listeners at home can understand. We all care about, optimizing and great solutions and all these other buzzwords, but palpably, and billing and this and that. But give me another example, just like the usage one.
Yeah. So there's a renewable energy thing. So for example, look at from this perspective that the energy that is being generated, it has to be utilized. Energy is something that you cannot store that much. So you need to know that how much is required. You need to know your demand so that you can generate the energy accordingly. So there are multiple ways of doing that. So one energy optimization, which EnPowered helps it, is that to look at that demand and then can help you with optimizing the energy prices. Like they're working at the price arbitrage for that matter. So one is the spike, that when to use the energy, and one is that when is the right time to buy the energy and then sell it. So every sector has a buyer and a seller there. So they are simplifying this solution as well, that what is the right time to buy the energy so that you can sell it at the time where the demand is high and you earn money from there as well. That's another way of doing that. Thirdly, the billing system. The big industries, how the bills are generated. There are multiple energy solutions. There are multiple programs different companies are enrolled in. Like, for example, I have enrolled myself, like, for example, in New York, you have enrolled yourself that in July, there's one day when the energy is going to be at its maximum usage. So a customer will enroll himself that I wanted to know that one day, when is going to be that one day, because I wanted to save my energy. So, but how this thing is going to have impact on your bill, you need to see that. So usually the bills are quite complicated. What EnPowered has done, it has made it simplified for you. The things are very nicely listed down for you so the customer doesn't find it difficult to understand, and there's no upfront cost for that. So that's why I said it provides simplified, innovative solutions, because there are multiple ways we can help our customers in order to towards the clean tech by letting them know when to reduce your usage, when to go for the backups generators, that if you don't use the energy at the peak time, you can save a lot of money. For example, I can give you an example in Texas last year, due to the energy crisis, 1 megawatt per hour price was $9,000. So if you have figured out when that peak was, you could have saved that much of money by spending that.
Wow. Oh my goodness. And how do you do this? Like the next question is, okay, this is really cool. You're telling me, if we know when things are on peak, you can save like $9,000. Yeah. I mean, my ears have perked up. I'm sure everyone's do. So tell me how do you do this, and how does AI help you do this? Of course, without revealing any trade secrets or patents. But how does AI help with this?
I always consider AI as another human. You're replicating a human for me, because I mentor students as well. So for me, as an educator, I believe that it's one of my students that I'm training. So what kind of information that person requires when that person is going to make a decision, whether it's going to be a spike or not. That's one thing. So this is how AI helps me in, because AI can look for those complex patterns between the weather. For example, when you use more electricity, when it's humid, you probably turn on your air conditioners. So the weather is a key element there. Number 2, you wanted to see in your particular domain, in your particular area, region. For example, we work in North America. There are some US states as well, along with Canadian states, provinces. So you have to look in that particular domain, that what is the demand in that particular region and how much energy capacity is being generated, because you have to keep an eye on that as well. You need to keep an eye on your smart grids production as well, that how much energy they are producing. Then you have to look at the past trends. So there are multiple things. Just think about as a human that if you are given this project, what would you look at? So you will think of, okay, but just I start with the one person. For me, like when I dived into energy sector, what I did, I looked into, okay, as a consumer, what do I do? When there's humid outside, I turn on my air conditioner. When it's snow outside, I turn on heating. So all that is going towards consumption of energy. So then I looked at it that what exactly are the factors. So in conclusion, AI helps you to do smart predictions for the weather forecast because we don't have to feel it and then make the prediction. We have to make the prediction for the future. So we have to have an accurate weather forecast. We need to have a certain trends for the load in that particular area. And we need to know our industry, the domain knowledge, like the context. If I'm working for Texas, I need to look into how the Texas industry works, in the industrial area and the consumer area, how the people are working, and what kind of programs they offered for their customers to save energy. Are there any incentives given to the customers there or not? So these are the things which are contextualized for that particular area that you need to look into.
So that's really fascinating. So what you're saying is that these machine learning models and are able to take inputs such as weather, geography, demand per geography, but also even it sounds like government incentives and government regulations and other opportunities. So there's also almost an element of legislation that's being considered as well. That's fascinating.
Yes. So there are a lot of elements, like you cannot narrow it down to few things because you are training it, you are creating an AI to facilitate human to make a decision with more confidence. You are developing AI to optimize the computational process. Like, for example, finding the pattern between all these areas, all these parameters that I've just mentioned. And they're just few of many other parameters that we use. But these are the things where AI really helps us to optimize the computational power of that and helps give us confidence towards decision making too.
I like that. AI gives us confidence toward decision making. That's fantastic. And, accelerating the adoption of clean tech and fighting climate change is a bold mission. And I'm curious, how your past experiences help you support NPowered's mission.
Yeah, so I've worked on the weather data a lot. So weather is something which really fascinates me because I've seen that while sitting in Hamilton, because I live in Hamilton, Canada. I could see that it doesn't snow in the valley part of it, but it's snow in Hamilton on the mountain. So even at one location, the weather is a little bit different. Diversity is there, a little. So what is happening in real world is that people are adjusting their weather forecast. When you're getting close to that particular time, people make adjustments to it, that how it looks like right now. So that is the biggest challenge towards it. That is the biggest challenge, especially with the global warming, I would say. The natural disasters itself is a big challenge, which is coming, which is like unforeseen. It's like an outlier, sort of. It's like you are going for a fraud detection. It's like somebody has done a fraud for you. You never expected this, and that thing happened. So it's like that. So that's the biggest challenge in this area with the global warming itself. So being familiar with the weather information, how it works, and what parameters could make a lot of impacts towards the prediction really helped me to work into this and how to like integrate it into the energy sector. I never thought of that from that perspective before I came to EnPowered. So, but EnPowered give me that insight that how energy is like dependent on the weather, and especially when you have the global warming and all this coming in.
Wow. Yeah. I hadn't really thought too much about that. But makes sense, right? And so it sounds like NPowered's use case regarding AI and machine learning is significantly oriented around just like you have tons of data. And if you look at this data and you optimize it, we're going to be able to make better decisions to use energy more strategically to both save money, but also ultimately save the planet. Would that be a great
Oh,
summary?
oh, absolutely. You just nailed it. You just summarized it really well.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, it's something that I think a lot of people care about. And on this podcast, more recently, we've had a lot of medical use cases. And those seem to be a little bit more slow going. And obviously, it takes time to get to market. And you've worked in the medical field and in healthcare related items. So I'd love to hear, do you feel that Cleantech's trajectory is moving faster? Do you feel that it is a sector that has a little bit more leeway to move a little bit more quickly than healthcare?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. Because in healthcare, the problem is that there are strict legislations in that sector particularly. Because, for example, let me give you an example of that. When I worked in the healthcare for that brain hemorrhage device, they asked me one question. Is this device is going to prevent them from having the brain hemorrhage? Or is this device is just an indicator that it's happening? I was like, isn't that the same thing? You will get the indicator, you will call 911 and that person is going to be saved. And they said, no, the legislations are different. One is not claiming that it's going to save your life. So you have altogether different legislations. So the legislations are quite tough for the life-saving things, where it's going to have an impact on a person's life. Whereas if it's just a facilitator sort of a device, then the legislations are different. Whereas in the clean tech, what I've seen so far, I cannot talk about everything in clean tech, but the area I'm focusing on, legislations are there and companies are, what I've noticed is that like 3 years ago, if I talk about startups, they were let's just going forward with their product and they were not giving that much importance to the legislations. But right now, what I've noticed is that people are more informed about these legislations. And from day one, they think of a product and then they think of what kind of process we have to go through. So it's a kind of responsible AI. Now you're going towards responsible AI. You're responsible. You're taking ownership of this. Because the second part of legislation is that you cannot say, oh, I don't know. My AI algorithm just detected this. How do I tell you what he did? It's a black box. So now you cannot give this answer. You have to take ownership of your AI. So for example, just for the night to move that if something goes wrong, who you are going to sue? You cannot sue a machine, an AI algorithm. So you have to have a person on the other hand who is responsible for this particular thing. So the legislation is teaching you to take responsibility of this, make a responsible AI. There shouldn't be any bias. There shouldn't be anything which is impacting indirectly your conclusions. So yes, healthcare is a complex area. It's a complicated field. And in clean tech, legislations are there, but people are more prepared. And it's not that strict as compared to the healthcare. That is my observation.
Yeah. And what a great thing to hit on as we get towards the last few minutes here. Talking about responsible AI and taking ownership for what you've created and for the outputs of these algorithms. I think that is absolutely brilliant. And I'm thrilled that you spoke to this because we're seeing more and more how there needs to be some level of regulation and there needs to be ownership. And we absolutely need to have responsible AI. It is not just a buzzword. It is something that has real implications. It has real implications in clean tech, and it has even realer implications in healthcare, as you mentioned, right? And I love the way that you framed the legislation. I thought that was such an evocative example, saying that, the device that people were wearing to bed, is it going to save their life or is it just going to tell them when they're having some sort of brain aneurysm? It's like, well, if it lets you know, presumably it would also save your life. So I think that was just such a great example, so palpable, so clear and easy for our listeners to understand. On responsible AI, I want to know, do you have one word of advice or one nugget of wisdom that you want to share on how we can get towards a more responsible AI future?
I think because people usually see as a data scientist or the machine learning engineer, it's about creating the algorithms. But I think we all need to take one step back. We have to take responsibility of the data because you have to spend some time on that. And you have to make sure, because it's like a garbage in, garbage out. You got the data, and if you're going to train the model with that, whatever you're giving your model to learn from, your model is going to make the prediction accordingly. Okay? So it's important to spend time on that data. Make sure the data is not biased itself. At times, it's not the programmer who is designing the algorithm, it's the data you're having. Let me give you a real use case example in New York. Judiciary system, they design an AI model, and for their day-to-day cases, they ask the AI to make the judgment. So the AI was making a judgment because AI learned from the past cases. So what happened, they noticed is that the AI is biased towards African Americans. And they were like, oh my God, how AI can be biased? He's not a human. How he's biased about it? And then they figured out the data that you gave to AI, you are trying to replicate the human, and whatever the decision in that certain area were made, they were biased, and you are giving the same data to your AI. So it was not, the AI developer was not at fault, but I believe that now this is the responsibility you have to take in. That take one step back from your algorithm, look at your data, look at the context, look at the domain of your data. What kind of data you are getting? Is there any kind of bias which could be there, which can impact the final decision of your model? That's what we have to work on. Because this is the world, as I said earlier, this is the world which is not short of data. We have billions of data around. So it's us. We have to validate and we have to triangulate the information. Don't just rely on one source. Just try to triangulate it and then make a final decision that, okay, my data is not biased. Then from your perspective, when you're creating the algorithm, think about it. Am I making it out of convenience because this is convenient for me? So this is the bias coming from a developer's perspective. That's easy. Let's create it, So don't. Think about it. Whether this particular algorithm, because we have certain, every algorithm it's like a tool as well. Every tool has a trade-off. Every algorithm has a trade-off. So look at it. Weigh your algorithm selection as well. Then weigh your evaluation criteria so that each step should be taken very carefully and then make a final decision. So this is, for me, this is responsible AI. So at the end of the day, for example, let me give you an example of weather data. We don't rely on one source. We triangulate multiple sources. In Toronto, we look at multiple weather stations. We don't just rely on one. So it's about triangulating your information. Just don't rely on one source and take ownership of your data.
Absolutely. What a powerful, powerful message. Data drives bias, and taking a step back from the algorithms to really look at the data and being responsible about it and taking ownership to make that data better, that we can truly have responsible AI. What an incredible nugget and wonderful, wonderful thought to walk away from around how we can really make responsible AI happen. And with that, we have another episode of the Ask AI podcast. Thank you to Arooj Ahmed Qureshi for telling us all about NPowered and talking through responsible AI, her roller coaster journey from Pakistan through the UK to Canada. So many incredible nuggets. And as always, thanks to our sponsors, Microsoft Canada and Cinchi. Remember to send us your questions, feedback, and community news to info@askai.org. And don't forget to check out our team check-ins to learn more about what all sorts of interesting companies are doing across Canada with regards to AI. Thank you for joining us, and see you next time on the Ask AI podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Ask AI podcast. The sponsors of this episode were Microsoft Canada, producers of the free AI Business School, and Cinchi, the dataware platform that makes integration obsolete. The series producer was Chris McClellan. The series editor was James Fajardo. Original music was provided by Mike Letourneau. To learn how to be featured on our podcast and get information about sponsorship and volunteering opportunities, please visit our website at askai.org, send us an email to info@askai.org, or talk to our bot by visiting askai.org/chatbot.